The Simpsons has been running for over 3 decades, so it's no surprise the show has more forgotten characters than most people realize. Some of them disappeared after one episode, others were supposed to become recurring, but vanished with no explanation. Today we're going to look into what happened to these lost characters. Starting with Chester J. Lampwick, you probably remember him from the classic episode, The Day the Violence Died. He's the homeless man who claimed to have invented Itchy before being erased from cartoon history. After he wins a huge settlement from Itchy and Scratchy Studios, he just walks off with his money and never shows up again. It's a strange ending for a character who had such a big role. You'd think we'd see him in the background later, or maybe even as a joke about wealthy hobos. But nothing. It's like the writers dropped him right after the final scene. Another character that vanished is Laura Powers. She was voiced by Sarah Gilbert and introduced in the episode New Kid on the Block. Bart immediately falls in love with her, and she ends up dating Jimbo Jones. Her introduction was a big deal. She even got the spotlight over the main family for most of that episode, but she never became a real part of Springfield after that. For a while, fans thought she might return, especially since she moved in next door to The Simpsons. But she disappeared just as fast as she arrived. You can spot her in a few crowd shots if you pause at the right time, but she never speaks again. Then there's Herb Powell, Homer's long-lost half-brother voiced by Danny DeVito. He first shows up in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And then again in Brother, Can Ya Spare 2 Dimes? The writers actually gave him a redemption arc, turning him from a broken man into a millionaire inventor again. But despite being part of Homer's family, he was cut off from the show completely, not even a mention during big family events. Theories say it's because DeVito wasn't always available to voice him. Others think it's because the show shifted away from giving Homer too much backstory. Either way, he's one of the most well-known characters the show dropped. Speaking of family members who disappeared, what about Ling Bouvier? That's Selma's adopted daughter from China. She was introduced in Goo Goo Gai Pan, and at the time, the episode made it seem like Selma was turning over a new leaf, raising a child, being responsible. But Ling vanished. You'd expect to see her in scenes with Patty and Selma or at family dinners with Marge, but she's barely ever shown. Some fans think she aged backward because in later seasons, she still looks like a baby. Others think the writers just didn't know what to do with her. One of the more mysterious lost characters is Jacques, the French bowling instructor from Life on the Fast Lane. He almost convinced Marge to cheat on Homer, which makes him kind of important. The episode ends with Marge choosing Homer instead, but Jacques doesn't come back, not even for a joke. There was even a chance of bringing him back in another bowling episode, like Team Homer, but nothing. It's weird how such a big temptation for Marge never got followed up on. The show loves callbacks, but not this time. And then there's Jessica Lovejoy. Reverend Lovejoy's daughter was voiced by Meryl Streep and caused chaos when she showed up in Bart's Girlfriend. At first, she seemed like a good influence, but she quickly turned out to be even more rebellious than Bart. It felt like she could have become a major side character, especially as a bad influence in Springfield Elementary. But she never showed up again. Maybe it was because getting Streep to return wasn't realistic, or maybe the writers thought there wasn't enough room for 2 troublemakers. Either way, she just vanished after that one episode. If you're wondering about some of the animals, yes, they disappear too. Like Laddie, the expensive police dog Homer accidentally adopts in the Canine Mutiny. He was supposed to be the perfect dog, even better than Santa's little helper. But after being given away to the police force, he's never seen again. Santa's little helper got dozens of episodes and even backstories, but Laddie just got erased. Same thing for Pinchy, Homer's pet lobster from Lisa Gets an A.
Sorry, Marge. Pinchy got all dirty in the yard chasing birds. But don't worry, I put him in a nice hot bath.
Pinchy died in a boiling pot, which was dark enough, but it also meant he could never return. Now let's talk about Roy. You probably forgot about him because he was meant to be forgotten. He was introduced in the Itchy and Scratchy and Poochie show, and the joke was that he was a forced new character added to boost ratings. What makes it funnier is that even after the episode, he stayed around for a few scenes.
Good news, everybody. I'm moving into my own apartment with 2 sexy ladies.
You can actually spot him in the background of the Simpsons spin-off showcase, which makes it even weirder. He wasn't just a one-time gag. They kept him in for a while. But eventually, he disappeared with no explanation. Then you got characters who weren't just forgotten. They were replaced. Take Marvin Monroe, the psychiatrist. He was a recurring character in early seasons, showing up in therapy sessions and news panels. But he disappeared so suddenly that the show even joked about his death. They named a hospital after him and treated him like he was gone. But years later, he came back out of nowhere and claimed he'd been very sick. The writers literally didn't know what to do with him, so they just made a joke about it and moved on. A similar thing happened with Bleeding Gums Murphy. He was Lisa's mentor and musical inspiration, and his death in Round Springfield was one of the first emotional moments of the show.
Passed away.
But after that, he was barely mentioned. He got a quick appearance as a ghost, and that's it.
Man happy, Lisa.
You'd think Lisa, who was so deeply moved by his loss, would bring him up again, but like a lot of things in The Simpsons, the show moved on. Characters come and go, even the ones who meant something. Even Snowball, the family's first cat, was lost without much story. She died before the show began, and we only know about her because of Snowball the Second. But then Snowball the Second also died and got replaced by Snowball the Fifth, who Lisa just decided to call Snowball the Second again to avoid confusion. So technically, we've had multiple cats all pretending to be one. It's a weird way to handle pet death, but it fits the show's logic. Then there's Larry Burns, Mr. Burns' legitimate son, voiced by Rodney Dangerfield. He appeared in Burns Baby Burns, and the whole episode was about family, legacy, and social classes. But after that, nothing. No mention of him during episodes about the Burns family, not even a cameo. Some fans think this was a one-off joke that didn't fit the rest of Mr. Burns' cold personality. Others just assume Larry left town and never came back. Either way, the show never tried to bring him back. There's also Wendell. You probably remember him as the kid who's always nauseous and looks like he's about to faint. In the early seasons, he was everywhere, in class, on the bus, at field trips, but over time he faded into the background. He's still technically part of Springfield Elementary, but he never gets any lines anymore. No episodes, just silent cameos. Now we're getting into some of the deep cuts, like Benjamin, Doug, and Gary, the three nerds from Springfield University. They were big in the episode Homer Goes to College, but since then, nothing. Not even when the show goes back to the college or revisits nerd culture. You'd think they'd show up in Comic Book Guy's store or at a tech convention, but the writers forgot about them too. Right, so now we've talked about the truly forgotten kids in Springfield Elementary. There's still more characters who were cut from The Simpsons or slowly faded away across the years. Take Chester Lampwick, not to be confused with Hans Moleman, though the two have very similar energy. Chester was introduced in The Day the Violence Died, as the real creator of Itchy, basically rewriting the whole history of the Itchy and Scratchy show. He won a lawsuit, got rich, and was never seen again. What's strange is that his existence kind of broke the show's cartoon logic. If he really created Itchy, then the whole studio behind it should have changed forever. But The Simpsons quietly ignored that, and Chester vanished. It feels like the writers knew they had gone too far with him, so they buried it and never brought him back. Then there's Mindy Simmons, who almost broke up Homer and Marge in Season 5. She worked at the power plant and was basically Homer's perfect match. But after their brief romance that almost was, Mindy was never mentioned again, even though she was voiced by Michelle Pfeiffer. For someone who almost changed Homer's life, she just disappeared. And what's worse is how she was completely ignored during episodes that explore Homer and Marge's relationship history. She had the kind of exit that feels more like the writers wanted to protect the illusion of Homer's loyalty, so they made sure she stayed gone. Another forgotten one is the original Snowball, the Simpson family's first cat. She died before the show started and was only ever seen in flashbacks or as a name in Lisa's sad poems. But Snowball's absence created a weird tradition because after Snowball the second dies in season 15, Lisa adopts another cat, then another, and ends up naming the next one Snowball. The second one just to keep continuity simple. The gag alone proves how the show started recycling its own legacy. It was easier to erase the old characters than explain why things were changing. Then we have Uter, the German exchange student with a thing for chocolate and getting bullied. He was always used as a butt of the joke, but after season 16, he slowly stopped appearing in any meaningful way. There's even a joke in the PTA disbands where Principal Skinner says, "Oh, don't worry, Uter's around, somewhere," implying he might have actually died. That's a dark joke, but also kind of explains why he vanished. He's still spotted in crowd scenes sometimes, but it's like the show didn't want to deal with the ethics of making a child character purely for punchlines. So instead of writing him out, they just made him more invisible. Remember Julio's boyfriend, Grady? He appears once in a season 14 episode where Homer ends up moving in with him by accident. They share a heartfelt moment, and Grady was voiced by Sex and the City star Scott Thompson. But after that, he's gone. Julio later returns to the show with a totally different character design and personality, while Grady disappears entirely. It's one of those cases where continuity doesn't matter much in Springfield. The characters can just be reset without explanation. Or take the Capital City goofball. He was supposed to be the face of Capital City, the Simpsons version of New York, but after one episode, he faints out completely. You'd think he'd show up during city parades or sports events, but nope, not even during episodes where the family goes back to Capital City. It's like the writers just didn't want to deal with that giant mascot costume anymore. He's even referred to as unemployed in a later episode just to explain why he's never around anymore. Then we have Alice Glick. She's the sweet old lady from Three Men and a Comic Book who tricks Bart, Milhouse, and Martin into doing chores. She's clearly based on the classic trope of the little old lady with a twist.
All right, then off you go to spend it on penny whistles and moon pie.
But after her one main episode, she basically dies off screen. Her house is even shown abandoned later. She had no family, no backstory, no second appearance, just one episode and gone. In a way, her disappearance fits the quiet loneliness the show occasionally hints at. But still, it's a bit haunting how forgotten she is. But the most mysterious vanishing act might belong to Herb Powell, Homer's long-lost half-brother, voiced by Danny DeVito. He was introduced in a dramatic two-parter, lost his fortune because of Homer, then rebuilt it in a redemption episode. And then nothing. DeVito's star power didn't bring Herb back, not even in flashbacks. It's like the show decided Homer having a successful sibling complicated things too much. So they just left Herb in the past. No grave, no mention, no final goodbye. Even in a show like The Simpsons, where time stands still, the characters don't. Some of them vanished because their jokes stopped working, while some disappeared for other reasons. But they were all part of the town once. Let us know in the comments down below if we missed any characters. You might as well subscribe so you never miss another.